Earlier this month, the House of Representatives passed its version of the National Defense Authorization Act, which included many amendments that course correct the Biden administration's social experiments in the military. But the version in the Senate includes language that would force young women to register for the Selective Service System, which is often referred to as the draft. Now, the outcry from this continues to build as many Republicans sound the alarm against drafting our daughters. Joining me now to discuss this and much more about the social experimentation that's taking place in the Biden Department of Defense is Congressman Chip Roy. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, the House Rules Committee, and the House Budget Committee. He represents the 21st Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Roy, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, good afternoon, Tony. Great to be on. I hope you're doing well.
I am. Before we get to the bad parts of the NDAA being advanced in the Senate, I want to congratulate you and your Republican colleagues for the House version and the amendments that it contains. You were able to correct a lot of the mischief and dangerous policies that have been advanced by the Biden administration. So thank you for fighting for those things.
Well, thanks, Tony. And it was a collaborative effort, and I think we put forward a good product. I want to thank the Speaker's team, Speaker Johnson's team. We had a great, collaborative effort working together to make sure we got a defense bill that takes on the woke social engineering at the Pentagon, the transgender surgeries, all of the stuff there, the DEI offices, trying to refocus it, ending the climate executive orders application at the Pentagon, and refocusing it on pay and making sure we have hard assets. So that was a good product. We've now got that out of the House. It's a good bill, one of the better NDAs we've ever passed. So now it's going to be, working it out and getting to conference with the Senate. The Senate has obviously gone a little off the rails, which you would expect with the Schumer-led Senate, but unfortunately with Republican support for things like drafting our daughters.
Yeah, you immediately spoke out against that portion. We've talked about that before. And I think people need to understand this is not the first time they brought it forward, and this is the issue with the left. They never stop. They will continue to come back year after year to push their radical agenda. And it's why we have to draw a clear line saying, no, we won't go there. Tell our viewers and our listeners why you see this as problematic.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not even just Democrats. There are some Republicans in the Senate who have advanced this as well, and they should be called out for it. I mean, and some of them are friends. I mean, some of them will vote for an NDAA because they feel obliged to do so to support defense, but they're going to do so, and in it is provision that's going to require your daughter. I want everybody listening to just think about this. Your daughter, I'm the father of a 13-year-old girl, to register for selective service. And what they will say is like, don't worry, Chip, they'll never be put into combat, right? But never mind the fact that our entire point of our draft is to go replace our frontline volunteers, the people who sign up to volunteer to serve in the military, to go replace the folks in combat that are going down. You need bodies. That's why it exists. So to say that we're going to have a draft, mandatory selective service, and then say that's not going to be required when we have some sort of actual land war with China is insane, and it's contradictory. And if you go look at the standards, we very clearly lower the standards for women in combat, women in the military. There's reports put out and commissioned by the Department of Defense that literally say those standards are not being met. It's not even close. And so now you're going to take not just the women who want to go serve in the military, who are going to be among your stronger, your more athletic, and people who are like, yes, I want to go to West Point. No, we're going to be talking about a draft of our 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 22-year-old females, and we're going to go throw them into the military. They say, well, Chip, Israel does this. Now, hold on. Very different, number one. Number two, they often have a public service component. They're not put in combat. Number three, Israel is surrounded and their livelihoods depend on it, and there's a very small number of people there. Number four, I just disagree with the policy even in Israel. I don't think we should use that as a model. I think we should stand up. We should be fighting this with everything we've got. No Republican should support it. We killed it a few years ago when it was in both the House and the Senate bills. Now we thankfully don't have it in the House, thanks to leadership here listening and working to the whole conference. And I'm going to throw everything I have at trying to kill it, Tony.
Well, I want to zero in for just a moment on one of the arguments they're saying that you made reference to, that, oh, it's not going to happen. We're not going to draft. We're not going to have the draft, but we just need to be fair. We need to. This is, number one, it's a part of erasing the gender lines. This is more of that radical ideology. But number two, that's not a true statement that we're not going to have the draft. I feel pretty confident. And I volunteered, went in the Marine Corps as soon as I graduated from high school. If my children, daughters, sons wanted to join, I encouraged my sons. They went a different route into local law enforcement, first responders. My daughter's a first responder. It's not an issue. It's an issue of if they want to go. And I don't think we should be a nation that is dependent upon women having to fight on the front lines. But here's my point. We're having a problem in the military ever since Biden took over of meeting recruiting quotas. Our military has been depleted because of the ideological bent of this administration. People who would have signed up are not signing up. We get into a major conflict, we'll have to have a draft.
Yeah, Tony, you're exactly right. I mean, right now you've got the Assistant Secretary of Defense, I think her name's Kathleen Hicks, coming out and saying, oh, one of our primary objectives we need to do for national security, the strength of our military, is focusing on non-binary members of the military. They can't even tell you the difference between a man and a woman. Do you want your daughter being determined what she's going to have to do based on what those people are doing in the Pentagon and deciding they can't even decide whether there's a man or a woman? Meanwhile, Title IX has been turned on its head, all while they refuse to recognize the difference in the sexes. As you said, this is all about this nonsense where they're trying to remake everything and social engineering and break the back of what we recognize as people of faith, also just people of common sense, that there is a difference between the sexes. Right. So I'm going to stand up against it and keep fighting it.
Chip, back when I was in the Marine Corps, I was anti-tank. And so this is back when Russia was a threat. We had flashcards so that we could identify a tank, and we'd have to practice those flashcards. Maybe we need flashcards on male and female so they can understand the difference between the two. Speaking of the military, and I want to get to a moment, corporate America, and I'm going to talk about that. But first, earlier today, or I think it was yesterday, President Biden turned his focus to pardoning military veterans who were convicted of violating Uniform Code of Military Justice for engaging in homosexual behavior. He's pardoning all of them. Now, this while the administration drags its feet regarding many veterans who served honorably who were dismissed over the Pentagon's jab mandate. I mean, how wrong is that?
Well, again, this is about an effort to focus on the social engineering aspect and wokeification of the military rather than a strong military that is designed to blow things up and kill people, which is what a military is supposed to be designed to do. Used sparingly, in my worldview. I don't think we should be out engaged in endless conflicts. But now they're doing this. And those individuals, okay, whatever the policies that have evolved back in, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or long before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, those individuals, men predominantly, knew exactly what the policies were. And part of the whole point of the military code of conduct and how we can handle our military is the honor that is important, that you be forthright and honorable in your service. And, when you're lying about it, you're not being. And so that is what it is. And now they were going to do that, but they're not going to go help those people that were saying no to an experimental jab being shoved in their arm. And there's thousands of those individuals. I run into them all the time. It's completely unacceptable. But I do want to say, just for everybody listening, House Republicans have put forward a really good Responsible Defense Authorization Act. We are currently debating this week a really strong defense appropriations bill. I am not one, as you know, to shy away from criticizing even my own Republican colleagues. But we should champion and we should applaud when we're working together as a team to do some good stuff. And as we head into election season, understand the night and day difference between the radical progressive Democrats that want to draft your daughters and remake our military into this social engineering experiment versus Republicans who want a strong, non-woke, divided military that is capable of going out and doing the business of defending the country. And I think that's a clear distinction.
I want to turn to another topic, and that is corporate tax rate. It's currently at 21%. And it's shaping up as a pretty significant political issue. Now, I've been saying this for years, and what I'm hearing from Republicans is kind of music to my ears. For years, the corporate America has been carrying the water for the left in terms of their social policy. And our folks are left to basically pay for it with the profits of the business that they do with these corporations. But every time the corporation wants favorable tax policy, they turn to the Republicans. I think we should leave them to go to the Democrats and live with the Democrats' fiscal policies if they're going to live by their social policies.
Well, you're referring to an issue that has become a little bit of a lightning rod, because I was asked, and there's a story in Politico where I said, look, there's no rate that's sacrosanct, and I think everything should be on the table. Now, just for your listeners out there, when the tax reform was put in place in 2017 under President Trump, there were a number of tax provisions, many of which are going to expire next year. So you're going to hear a lot of debate about the tax policy, but the corporate rates were made permanent at 21%. That is a significant reduction with respect to making us competitive globally. I support that generally, as I suspect you do too, Tony. But to your point, I am tired of corporations taking this for granted. Tired of corporations going and taking subsidies to go out and enrich themselves, whether it's Obamacare and insurance subsidies or the Inflation Reduction Act, so-called subsidies for the energy policies. I want us to use leverage to force corporations to start being American first, centered on making sure they're delivering products. Drop all this ESG crap. Stop all your woke nonsense where June is like selling me, gay M&Ms or whatever you're trying to do, and just do your job. Now come back and talk to me about a competitive corporate rate. I'm not gonna fight making sure we have competitive tax rates for the good of all Americans. I do believe we need that. But I'm not going to rubber stamp what K Street and what the Chamber of Commerce says when they're not willing to work with us to save America and to stand up and make America first.
I agree 100%. And I think there are a lot of Americans that agree with that. Now, I think we should focus in on small businesses, the mom and pops that really employ a lot of people and make the local economies hum. In fact, I encourage people to shop at those places as opposed to the big box stores that have values that contradict what we're teaching our children. But for years, we've had these big corporations carrying the policies, the social policies of the left, forcing those on Americans, but then they turn to the Republicans wanting favorable tax policy. So I think your approach of using that as leverage to say, hey, you want a fair playing field, then just do business. If you make widgets, and let the left carry their own social policy.
No, that's exactly right, Tony. I mean, you don't see a lot of local businesses that are putting pride flags in their windows or championing this kind of stuff. Or, when they buy banners at Little League parks, they're not making them, reflect Pride Month. Why? Because that's not what local, businesses do. So, we need to do our part to make sure we have good competitive tax rates. But what I don't want to do is just rubber stamp this stuff and not use it to hold, these big businesses accountable to stand up for America, right? And not take subsidies and sell our souls, for profit, as opposed to, hey, be an American company.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Congressman Chip Roy, final question for you. Back to the NDAA and the fight that you and so many of the conservatives are waging to get our military focused on its mission, and that is to fight and win our wars. How can our listeners and viewers help on this?
Yeah, make sure you reach out to your members of Congress and say how proud you are that those Republicans in the House have sent a good bill that does refocus it, that does get rid of the woke stuff, the DEI, the critical race theory, the transsexual stuff, the abortion tourism, and does not draft your daughters. Make sure that's clear. And ask them to fight to make sure that the product that comes when we go to the Senate and conference, that we do the right thing and stand up and get a bill much closer to the House product. I think you should make sure every member of Congress hears that and tell your senators, don't vote for a defense bill that will draft your daughters. And that's what this is about.
All right, Congressman Chip Roy, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today and for waging the fight.
Thanks, Tony. God bless.